I am Oren Punkillo,
And I'm Kerry Thomas Cody.
and we are the Skull Crawlers,
Crawlers.
and we ask you to suspend disbelief, the show where we invite you to open your mind and expand your horizons as we discuss the paranormal, taboo, and otherwise mysterious occurrences in our universe.
Hey,
Gary, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. For any first time listeners, we are Native American filmmakers out of Oklahoma, and we just like doing spooky stuff. So I'm a writer, storyteller, filmmaker, and I'm of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma.
I am a writer, sometime director, producer, and I am of the Absentee Shawnee tribe of Oklahoma.
Heck yeah. And we're just trying to follow our dream and tell our stories for a living, and whatever they may be, and on the page or on the screen or
Mm.
even just on a podcast form. This is our passion. This is what we want to do. And today we have a guest, everybody. This is Elias Gold from Native Media Theory. Aho, bro. Thanks for coming on. Yes, sir.
Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Doing great, man.
Great, how are you?
So
Good. A little frazzled from all the freaking Marvel stuff I had to put out the past 2 years.
Yeah, that was awesome. What was that? What was that process like of interviewing them? Like, did you like wait on the Zoom or?
No, so originally I did like a video of me reacting to the Prey trailer, and that was like a year
I
and a
remember
half
that.
ago.
Yeah.
And then Disney, I guess they have like a PR department that's specifically for like BIPOC type people or multicultural or something like that. And so they reached out to me and they're like, "Hey, we really enjoyed your video. Would you be interested in being part of the press junket for Prey?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And they didn't pay anything, but it's good for my selfish purposes of bumping up the channel and the
Yeah.
credibility of the
Yeah,
channel.
absolutely. Yeah, when you got to interview Amber Midthunder and Dakota Beavers, that's how I found your channel. I was like, holy crap! I said, who is this guy who gets just huge actor?
Well, what's funny too is Dan Trachtenberg actually reached out too on Instagram.
Yeah.
He DM'd me and was like, "Hey man, I really loved your video. It was actually really cool. I sent it to the cast. I sent it to Jane, and then he asked me like, where are you based out of? Because I want to see if you can watch it." But I told him that like, oh, like Disney wants me to watch it already, and he's like, "Okay, cool." He's like, "Just watch it on a big screen with a good sound system." I'm like, "Okay." So
Yeah, that's awesome.
that was kind of surreal to have Dan Trachtenberg just like DM me out of the blue and be
Yeah,
like,
dude.
"Watch the video."
I've been a big fan of that guy since 10 Cloverfield Lane. He freaking rocks, dude.
Yeah.
When I heard that he was doing the Prey movie, I was like, that guy? And I thought about it, I'm like, that might be pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And the more I heard about Prey, the more sold on it I was. And yeah, it's an incredible movie, and I'm so glad that it exists, and the whole journey of it coming out, being made, and stuff like that. Man, it's just freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really cool. Cool to get some insights from him too about the whole process and everything. So, but
Yeah,
yeah.
because wasn't like that originally like not gonna be a Predator movie, and then they made it a Predator movie?
No, so he wanted it to be, but then as far as I understand it, it was gonna be a short, or
Oh, okay.
it was gonna be shorter. And it was gonna be almost, I think he was going for like a nonverbal thing, kind of like that animated show Primal.
Oh, yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's the vibe he was going for. But then I think the more and more he fleshed it out, he's like, "Oh wait, we actually had some potential to do something more unique with this." And then they made the script longer and pitched it to the for the Comanche Nation and everything. So it was actually really interesting. It was originally going to be called Skulls too. I think that's what
Yeah, I
the
remember
working
that.
title
Yeah.
was. So
That's pretty cool.
yeah.
Well, right on. Yeah, actually, Jane Meyer, who is one of the executive producer of Prey, one of the executive producers, and she is Comanche, and so she was like the cultural advisor, making sure that everything was accurate, and she was on set making sure that things were the way that they're supposed to, that native stories are being told the way they're supposed to. Um, my dad went to high school with her, and they
Oh
were
wow.
almost sweethearts. And so my dad told me many times, like, she could have been your mom. I was like, look at her now, man.
Almost your mom, huh? Oh, there was something interesting. I don't know if you guys catch that in my interview with her. She basically alluded to the fact that the Muppets is a cryptid for the Comanche.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
so like in the dub, the Comanche dub, and then even in English too, when when um when Naru is confronting the other tribal guys, she's like, "Hey, like I ran across some Muppets," and that's when I asked Jane in my interview, I was like, "What's a Muppets?" And she says it's a big scary monster that we tell children scary stories about. And then that's when I realized it's basically a Comanche cryptid like a Bigfoot.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but it was interesting that they put that in the film to in the world of the Comanche, right? There's this cryptid
Mm,
going around killing people. I thought that was really interesting.
That rocks. I love so much that they were able to incorporate, um, their native mythology, their tribe's mythology into
mm,
the movie. That's
Yeah.
just brilliant storytelling. It's
Yeah.
genius. Anyway, huge fan of the movie. But yeah, guys, we're big fans of Elias and what he does on his channel. He actually was a director, a co-director, and a producer of uh, an award-winning short film recently called Disinfectant. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, that was that honestly, me and my co-director had no idea it was gonna be as good as it was.
Yeah, or
It,
have you?
it was run
no, I
and
haven't.
gun concepting. So him and I were just sitting at work,
Yeah,
and then because we work together, and we're like, we need to make something. We need to just do something, like because him and I are both sitting on like larger budget short films that we're in the process of getting like pre-production stuff for.
yeah,
But we're like, we just need to do something like quick and dirty, fun, just to get our chops up. And so we concepted that idea together. And the idea was originally his. He always had this vision of like an office, a janitor in an office building being haunted or being killed by some random creature. He just thought the vibe and the eeriness of it would be really interesting to explore. So we literally just, went back and forth, figuring out limitations. We're like, oh man, I don't think we're gonna have the budget to do this. Like, I think originally one of the ideas was to have like the walls like be fleshy and have like a creature inside of it, like the building was a
Sick.
creature. But then we were like, oh, we can't do that. That's a lot. We have to build that. We have to like do all that. So
yeah.
we just
That's
came up.
not very practical to do something.
Yeah, exactly. And so we kind of landed on just some sort of demon-like creature, that was, messing him psychologically with a lot of people and everything. So we just, yeah, there's actually he actually has his own YouTube channel as well, where he does a lot of theoretical film stuff in general. He actually made a behind the scenes video about it, and you guys should probably check that out. But it was fun. We just I gathered most of the crews the best I could, some PAs, the makeup artists. She went to school with me. She's actually also native as well.
Nice.
And we just were like, hey, we're doing this. I gathered all the stuff, and one like the Friday night after work, after everyone went home, we're like, okay, then we're go film. And
Wow.
yeah, and that was the end of it. It was pretty simple, straightforward. Actors were all free.
Yeah.
Crew is free. The only expenses were on some crafty and like the camera and G&E equipment, and that was like $600-ish, and that was it. And then our makeup artist, she used all of her own stuff that was she just had, she's like, I don't need all this for, anything crazy right now, because she does mostly commercial work, so she's literally just doing the general makeup on actors.
Mm.
She's not doing a lot of heavy VFX stuff as much. So she's like, I have this black paint, I have these nails, all this. So it was fun. It
That's
was
awesome. I
quick
did
and
actually
dirty.
watch the behind the scenes video of that, which was really insightful. I'm really impressed with the other director. What is his name?
Zach, yeah, Zach
Zach.
Domet.
Yeah, he rocks. He's got his own channel, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's pretty neat. Guys, I will link their short film right in here. Check it out. It's amazing. They placed second in the Jacob Owens short film contest a couple months ago, and they won some swag, which is really impressive because we
Yeah, I got the hard drive today.
Oh, nice.
The Tropic Color hard drive. It's got like freaking thousands of assets and everything. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
impressive.
gonna
Yeah,
use.
we saw the trailer for that, and we're like, should we do something for it? And Sarah and I had just had a baby, so we're like, it's not gonna happen, but it's fun to dream about, And we're sitting
Yeah,
on a couple short film ideas, and we're constantly thinking like, maybe we can just get out for like a day or two and go shoot something. with maybe one actor and a creature or something like that, just to kind of dust off the cobwebs and whatever else. Just go and have a good time.
Yeah.
Done anything in almost a year now, unfortunately. It's just because
Yeah.
life gets a little crazy. Um, but we're still sitting on one of our short films, our most ambitious one yet. It's called Birthday Bash. It is
Ooh.
about a killer birthday cake monster. It's insane. It's gory. It's a coming of age story with two 11-year-old girls, and they have to fight off this creature. It's pretty cool. We are excited about it. We're gonna do the festival thing this year and send it off, and do a couple local festivals. Maybe send it out to like Skins Fest or something like that.
Yeah, there we go.
Just kind of see what happens.
I watched your Goatman short. That was pretty good.
Watched it. I was gonna say, yeah.
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 What you were talking about disinfectant was it's very similar to how our Goatman short was. It mimics, and yeah, very similar in story and the whole process and everything. But ours was the budget was on about 2 or 3 hot and ready pizzas,
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody was super low.
$8 for a couple of
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the
Pizzas, man.
crew and lighting and cameras on hand. So yeah, we had a good
Yeah,
Yeah,
time.
that was a
man.
fun one.
That whole experience just taught me it's like who you know.
Mm.
Like our DP. I actually used to work with him too at another job, and his skills as a DP have improved in the last like 2 years. And the DP and my co-director are also like childhood friends, so it just all worked. It's
Yeah.
a lot of previs and everything. So it testified it's you can do a lot with very little if you kind of know what to improvise with and everything.
Yeah.
You are
That
exactly right.
and like people who are just down to go run and gun, shoot stuff, and just hang out and have fun. Like that's most of our productions is just good faith, like good, people who are down to help out. So
Yep.
People hear
A lot of-
horror, man, they come running.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a good genre to kind of get people interested. That's why I was talking with Sterling in another a little YouTube channel, and he was talking about how he thinks, and I think too, that genre is like the future for native filmmaking and everything.
Yeah, and for horror and stuff, and I'm toying with the idea of a couple different screenplays for feature films and stuff like that. And right now, I'm kind of focusing my efforts towards like novellas and short stories because that's something that I can do with a newborn and a 2-year-old, after work and stuff like that. Really hard to do filmmaking stuff like that, but I'm trying to do more writing. And we had him on our pod. He kind of threw out the idea of Hollywood's just waiting on a good native script. And I was
Mm.
like, oh man, the opportunity is there, and
Yeah,
people.
I have one too that I'm kind of working on. It's ambitious, but I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to tackle that as early on in my career or not. But like a
Yeah.
lot of other filmmakers did horror at the beginning of their careers, and so I'm like, this might be a bit more accessible. But
Yeah.
it's ambitious, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. I have to focus on the short film that I'm in previs for right now. So, um, and we're shooting that in April. So that one it's just a 5-page comedy script about a Navajo guy stealing sheep guts. So
It rocks, dude.
Wow. Nice.
Well, sweet. Oren, do you have any questions before we start some scary stories?
Yeah, I have a couple.
And Elias, can you tell us about where you're from, where you grew up, and what tribal affiliation you are?
yeah, so I'm Diné, Navajo. I was born and raised in Shiprock. That's like in the Four Corners area near Farmington, that whole area. Then I moved like on a border town, just like literally 10 minutes down the road. Um,
Hold on.
yeah, I'm I'm,
That,
I'm from
that
that
live
area,
like in Oklahoma. Which state is that?
New Mexico. Like literally on the northwestern corner of New Mexico, right in the Four Corners area. So yeah, that's where I was born and raised, Navajo reservation over there, and so uh, yeah, that's me. I went to film school here in Utah at BYU, and I finished 2020. That's when I finished. It was a long road.
Imagine. We're envious of you going to film school because Warren and I, like, I'm a music school graduate, and because that's what I wanted to do for a long time. But yeah, if we can go back now, we definitely try our efforts more towards film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I'm a music school dropout, and yeah, I wish I had gone to film school.
I will say it was. I think it depends on the school you went to, but mine was a lot more theory and like industry based.
Mm,
There's another university nearby. They're a lot more like hands on with like technical things, but then at the same time, they just teach you the technical, but they don't teach you like, oh, how to get like navigate the industry. But my university, they were a lot heavy on like theory and history and industry insights and stuff like that. So I talked to some people who like have done really well without film school, and then people who have, and I think it's just personality. And for my personality, I'm glad that I went to film school. It was actually very. It's actually partially why I started my channel because I took a few theoretical and history classes. I mean, you can tell from up here. Um, but that really kind of sparked the gears going for making that channel because I was like, there's media theorists and film theorists out there, but like
mm.
no one is in this realm of talking about indigenous representation. So I don't know. I kind of give schooling my a big credit to my channel and everything. So
That's what I really enjoyed about your channel, especially the native tropes and horror, the two-parter you did.
mhm.
Because like there's a lot of those, like, the old mystical Indian man and like the Indian burial ground, stuff like that. And it's like these things I've thought of, and you see and read, and like Stephen Graham Jones and stuff like that. It was just interesting to see from your native perspective, like an analysis of that stuff and like where horror came from. Like pretty much we're kind of the template, and we've had those stories, and
Yeah,
it's like everybody's just catching up.
your
Yeah.
analysis on that was brilliant. It's a great video essay of all of the tropes. I really enjoyed it, and I think your main point on that was like you can like let those people who those are their stories, let them tell those stories.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's so incredibly important, especially your whole analysis on the whole Avatar 2 thing and Avatar in general. I think that was brilliant as well, and it's basically the same thing. It's how I felt. I haven't even watched the second Avatar yet, and I need to because I'm a huge film fan, and so I want to watch it for the sake of CGI and
Yeah. Yeah.
spectacle of it all. But when I tried to rewatch the first one a couple months ago, and just hearing all uh, the actors like doing their war cries and stuff like that, I was just like,
It's cringy, huh? After you think about it, it's cringy.
Yeah, isn't Wes Studi like the only legit native in the Avatar, the first
Yeah,
one? Yeah.
yeah. In my YouTube video, I talked about how out of the both two films, there's only been three. Oh, what the hell? Oh, that was weird.
hand gestures. It'll
Yeah, well, there's only been three native actors kind of heavily involved with like that gave some sort of indigenous insight out of the two films.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it's so incredibly embarrassing for a couple billion-dollar franchise or whatever it is, however much money.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
I liked what Sterling said in your guys's when he was on your guys's podcast. He talked a bit about how in Res Dogs he tried to capture the just how in the native worldview a lot of these supernatural things are just an everyday thing.
Mm,
It's like part of our lives, and I talked a bit about that in my native tropes video, and then I talked a bit about that in like my Res Dogs review of season 2, where that realism is there. It's for natives, these things are just they're a part of everyday life. They're there, and it's just funny to me because like I think a lot about Bigfoot or Sasquatch. It's like through the American Western view, he's this big scary ape monster, but to a lot of tribes, he's actually more of like a sacred figure or kind of this enigmatic spiritual figure. I think
mhm.
I want to say for the Salish people, they use a Bigfoot mask to utilize in the renaming of their new chief. So like the
Oh.
the the the, the Bigfoot is a central figure of authority for them. I could be completely misspeaking on that, but I remember reading that. Or I remember one time I went to the Museum of the American Indian over in DC, and there was a lot of these exhibits, and one of them was for tribes somewhere in the northeast, and they were listing all their tribes, and they were all animal based, but one of them was the Bigfoot like clan, like the
Oh
clans. I'm
wow.
sorry, the clans within their clan structure, and one of them was the Bigfoot clan, right?
Yeah.
And I just always thought it was fascinating. Growing up, I heard that Bigfoot was more of like just this enigmatic, neutral, spiritual type of creature, or like just lives out in the woods. You don't bother them. Or I always grew up hearing that you give them offerings of fruit, and like fruit baskets and stuff like that. And it's just funny how in the Western view, Bigfoot is this big scary ape man in the woods that eats you or tears your limbs off, you know. And seeing the difference in the worldview of how we view those things goes way deeper into how, like I mentioned in the beginning of my horror video, about it affected policy, right? It affected how the government treated our ancestors, and even today, kind of with seeing us as these weird things of nature that need to be tamed.
Yeah.
And a lot of our belief systems were demonized because of that. But yeah.
Very well said. And in our area, at least in my tribe, southwestern Oklahoma, tobacco is like the magical offering. So um, if say cut down a tree or something like that, you lay out some tobacco,
Mm,
Mhm.
or sometimes if you hear an owl come to your house, and sometimes it can be a bad omen, or sometimes it could just be giving you a message or something like that. You give it some bread or some tobacco or something like that, and then it goes same thing for Sasquatch as well.
mhm,
Or for your elders. One of my dad's aunt, we call her Grandma Sue. She lives out on the land, um, which is our allotment land, and we are given that back in the 1800s by the government, and we still have it in the family. And she lives out on the land. She's roughing it. She's one of the last true plainswomen. She's out there doing it, man. She takes baths in the creek, gets fresh water from the creek, and when we go visit her, we give her a bottle of Dr. Pepper and you know a pack of cigarettes. Just as like, hey, thank you for letting us come out here, even though it's our land too. We still appreciate you letting us come out here. So the offerings go a long way.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Well,
All
sweet.
right. So
Martin,
segue a little
did
bit.
you have more questions? Sorry, I went on a long rant.
No,
I
you're
didn't
good.
mean
No worries. That's why we have a podcast. Just talk and discuss.
This is gold.
Um, so just going a bit about native representation in media, which we touched on a little bit. Where do you see it headed, like going forward? Like, I feel like right now there's a little bit of a renaissance, and there's more, you know, we're actively being listened to instead of stories being told about us. Like, there's actually native input, like, Prey. I mean, it was just directed by Scorsese, but Killers of the Flower Moon,
Mhm.
stuff like that. Where do you see, like, do you see more stories coming from us? Where do you see like a more, I guess, a positive representation in media? Like, where do you see us headed? Like, what's next? What do you think?
I need to make a whole video about this because I always talk about it on Instagram, and I reference it in my other videos. But I mean, you know how you guys know about different film waves in different cultures. So like
Mhm.
the Japanese New Wave, the Italian New Wave, the French New Wave, right? There's waves of movements, art movements, and film is part of that. And we had a movement in the early days of film. There were natives who were making their own stuff, but then the studio system became a thing, and the medium got popular, and so certain narratives had to be a lot more dominant than others.
Mhm.
And then you had obviously the different eras. I talk about that. Actually, no. Have you guys seen Real Engine, the documentary?
I may have seen bits and pieces. I don't think I've watched the
Okay, you
whole
guys
thing.
should really watch that. That's a great survey of like the entire history of Native representation in film. And he kind of goes in at this idea that there's waves. So like
Mhm.
there was the wave where we were always the antagonists, and then we turned to like the noble savage type character. And but all the way up until the 90s, we were kind of the backseat people. The 90s
Mhm.
was a weird era where you had kind of the white saviorisms happening. Last of the Mohicans, Dances with Wolves, Thunderheart, Pocahontas, all that was happening there.
Yeah.
And we kind of had this weird pause up until like the last, I don't want to say 10 years or so, where there were a lot of stuff coming out of Australia and New Zealand and Canada, mostly because their governments fund those projects.
Mhm.
But like in the mainstream and everything else, I feel like we've only been getting stuff happening in the last 10 years. So I feel like we're getting into a new wave, of Indigenous representation, and then where that wave is headed. I talked about it in my industry video where we have like native themed projects and native run projects. And native themed projects are what we've had for the longest time, where it's like non-native filmmaker, non-native studio, non-native producers and writers. They're like, oh, I want to do stuff with some native characters, basically like Taylor Sheridan, Kevin Costner type people,
Yeah, yeah.
and they want to have natives in their story, but they usually aren't predominant, or even if they are, the writing is weird, or they hire one native actor to be this character, right?
Or
Native
they're
run,
treated as like the tragic character,
yep,
or
yep.
yeah.
But now we have native run projects where Smoke Signals, in my opinion, was like the beginning of this new wave where we had Chris Iyer and Sherman Alexie combining forces and making Smoke Signals, right? That was the beginning of this new wave, in my personal opinion. But
Mm,
where everybody behind the camera, not just in front, is native, has native insights, puts their experiences onto the page and onto the screen. And so I feel like we're moving into an era where the native themed projects that are as big as these Marvel projects can have way more input. I mean, like Cohorty with What If, the Mohawk Nation actually was like very involved, even though the director and writer aren't necessarily native, but
mm,
they still listened. They were open to hearing a lot of stuff and collaborating, right? That maybe 10 years ago probably wouldn't have been as prominent, you know? Um, so I think the new wave of native cinema is pushing outwards, and um, I always feel bad when I look at that page, that website, a tribe called Geek, because they cover so much, but it's because there's more and more native content being made now, which is a
mm.
good thing. And for me, it's hard to keep track of. There's so much. I'm like, oh man, like I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this. I want to talk about this, right? But there's so much now, and that's a good thing. It's a good problem to have when there's a lot of native content and native projects being made right now. And so I think we're getting to a point where we might be able to start having tribal specific directors and writers for certain projects, like Jane Myers with Prey. Like she was Comanche and she helped with Prey, right? Like we probably wouldn't have had that like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's my long-winded answer about where I think the future of native and indigenous filmmaking is going. We're entering a new wave of more autonomous filmmaking.
I think that's where Carrie, you can probably correct me, but the Cherokee Film Commission here in Oklahoma, that's they're trying to do in-house productions and studios and hiring creatives to
Because
make.
they had a lot of success lately with hosting different shows and films.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. But yeah,
And,
that was my long answer.
and you kind of answered my second question because I was going to touch upon the Marvel What If and Prey, and kind of talked about native themed uh projects as opposed to native created projects. So here is my last question. So in your channel, you talk about native representation in media, whether it's film, games, in whatever media. Is there a certain adaptation you would like to see like be remade or updated or remade? Like my personal what I would like to see remade is the old Turok video game with a
Yeah.
native and the dinosaurs.
Yep. They did have a cartoon. Was I talking to either one of you about the cartoon? I don't think I was. Okay,
Huh.
someone asked me about the cartoon. So there's a cartoon movie of Turok, and it has a predominantly native voice cast.
Oh, really?
It's got Adam Beach, Irene Bernard in it. Yeah, and I can't find it, but I've seen the IMDb and it says so.
Huh.
But yeah, it was an animated like made for TV movie. But it had a predominantly native voice cast. It was actually really fascinating. But I know what you're saying, like like a really hardcore, uh, Conan-esque Turok,
Yeah,
adaptation. Yeah, that'd be
that'd be
pretty sick.
awesome. Yeah.
For me, I think it would be, I don't know, like there's too much out there I would love to see. If I were to remake something from like a more native centric perspective, I would do Wind River
Mm,
from a way more heavily native perspective,
yeah.
because that film suffers from kind of some white savior tropes. Um,
Yeah. Especially with
it's
the Jeremy Renner character where he's not really native, but he's around native people and he kind of
yeah,
acts
yeah.
like them. So
His daughter's half native, and his
yeah.
ex-wife is native, right? but like the dad, like I would love to see a Taken John Wick style revenge tale
Oh
of
yeah,
that of the native father, taking his revenge. It's like it's because his character, it just the dad just sits behind and cries and moans the whole
yeah.
time.
He's almost treated as like the B plot of the movie when he's the like it's affecting him, like not Jeremy Renner's character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, yeah, so I feel like if I were to kind of reimagine something, I would probably do that, like to have a more native centric viewpoint of that character and that whole story. Because
Mhm.
the world it's set in is interesting. Like Taylor Sheridan's really good at creating like worlds. Like the feeling of his world feels really well lived in, right?
Mhm.
But I feel like his narratives seep into all that with
Yeah.
Yellowstone, and they try with Yellowstone in 1883. They try, but it still dives into it's not a show meant for natives. It's a show that just happens to have natives, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
So
Elias, you've watched crap. I sound really dumb right now. It was a Peacock show, Rutherford Falls. You
oh,
watched
Rutherford Falls, yeah, I've been meaning to do a video on that. I actually worked with Michael recently, and so I've been kind of timing my relationship with him to kind of be like, hey,
really?
I want to
He's
ask you
he's
about
one of my
this.
favorite Indigenous actors right now, and he was great in Rutherford Falls. And I
Yeah.
think the first thing I remember seeing him in was Fear the Walking Dead, and he had a whole character arc in that, and he was great in that. I
Mhm.
really liked him, and then seeing him kind of completely shift characters for Rutherford Falls was pretty cool.
Have
But
you
it
seen
was,
Wild Indian?
huh.
He plays a pretty scary character in Wild Indian.
Oh yeah,
He's really self-hating and scary, and he gives serial killer vibes in that film.
he was
Really
also
interesting.
in the
Nice.
new Firestarter as is the name Rainbird? Is that correct? The
I
main bad
haven't seen
guy.
that one.
The you talk about the Zac Efron remake?
Yeah, you can avoid it. It was so incredibly bad, and the poor girl who played the main character, she was voted for a Razzie, and the whole internet came to her side and said it was very mean uh to vote like an 8 or 9 year
A
old girl
child. Yeah.
child
Damn.
for like a worst actor, worst movie award. But
Yeah.
Michael Gray, he was okay in it, but they watered down his character. They made him kind of be out to be like an anti-hero in a way
Mm,
when supposedly he's supposed to be a really bad guy. And so I was really disappointed in that because I wanted to see him like be like bad. And my dad actually auditioned for that role, and he was like, "Oh, I got this one, son." I was like, "All right, we'll see." He's been telling me that my whole life. He's been going to open auditions forever, dragging me along, me and my little brother doing auditions and stuff. Um, but of course, he got uh, outdone by Michael Gray Eyes.
yep. He was pretty good at Sitting Bull. Have you seen Woman Walks Ahead?
Uh,
He plays Sitting Bull in that one. His performance is a bit theatrical, but I think that was the director's direction, right?
Yeah.
Um, he's really mystical for Jessica Chastain, but he did pretty good. He's
okay,
also in Blood Quantum too.
this is
He's
Yeah.
really good.
that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the dude has range, and I want to see him do more stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, going back to Rutherford Falls, there is a whole episode where Michael Gray Eyes character and Jana, what's her last name?
Jenna
Like,
Schmidt.
yes, where they go and they're like cultural advisors on a show that's just like Yellowstone or whatever.
Yep, Adirondack.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah, it's literally so. I heard Jana talk about it in Santa Fe at the Indian market.
Hmm,
So basically, it's a parody of some of the experiences of producers and natives on set of Yellowstone.
unbelievable.
So
I thought,
because
I thought it was so funny when
yeah, it was hilarious. I thought it
at
was
the end the producers were like, "Oh, we don't care what you think. We just want you to be here so you have your name attached to it," or something.
literally just for PR purposes.
Literally, oh my
Yeah.
god.
And like the acting of like because one of the actors in the parody of the show was Ernest Sosis the third, and back home where I'm from, he's a pretty famous comedian.
Yeah.
But he plays the chief, and he's like, "Son, why would you give our land to the white man?" Like it's really theatrical. It's making fun of how Yellowstone kind of does that, and I thought that was really clever. But speaking of Rutherford Falls, Michael Gray's has a really cool monologue in that. second season that
Yeah.
really like stuck out to me. Is really fascinating. Very, you see a tinge of Michael Gray as his potential for a villain in
Yeah.
that monologue, and it's really cool.
Everybody go watch Rutherford Falls on Peacock. It was canceled too soon,
Yeah,
but
it was.
go watch it anyway. The first 2 seasons are incredible. It takes place in a fictional town about a fictional tribe, so all natives can kind of relate to everything about it. Brilliant show, great writing. Ed Helms is in it from The Office. He was great, so go check it out. Um, I say let's move on to some scary stories, guys.
Yeah.
We have Elias here. He is Navajo or Dene, and he has some Skinwalker stories. And I'm curious to hear your experience in the Southwest with Skinwalker stories, and maybe whatever other kind of scary stories that you might have as well. So enlighten us. Where do you want
Man,
to start?
this might be long because I might go into my own conspiracy theories about
Hey,
stuff.
hey,
Maybe
Oh,
not
let's go for
conspiracy
it.
theories, but my
horror
like
episode, it's all good.
my crazy like how things connect more in my head. Yeah, so I grew up in the Southwest. So while I lived in Shiprock, I have family that lived a little bit deeper on the reservation, and I would go visit them in the summer times in the fall every once in a while, or like my mom would have these conferences, so she's like send me off to my cousins for a week or two, and it's a different vibe out there deeper on the res. It's more rural. There's hardly any trees, um and so out there is where some of the things that I've experienced happen, because the city I grew up in, Shiprock, I mean, it's a city, but like compared to where I live now, it's freaking, kind of bumfuck nowhere. But um back home, skinwalkers are, and this is the thing, like I always distinguish. Carrie, did I send you that guy's YouTube channel, that Navajo guy's YouTube channel?
Did I watched a couple
Yeah.
of videos, the ones that you sent, very insightful.
Yeah.
He goes into detail about
Yeah.
skinwalkers, and he even admits, like, he's like, probably shouldn't be telling you these
Yeah.
things, but I'm gonna
And it,
like, all right, like things like details, or and I'm not.
yeah,
Oh wow, all right.
for those of you listening, his YouTube channel is called, what's it called? Shan Clan Shadow Productions.
Yeah,
He's a Navajo guy,
right
and he has
here,
a lot
check
of
it out.
interesting stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and
But
he's got some good stories, guys. Go check him out.
yeah,
Try to get
and
him on the show.
a lot of his stories echo a lot of my experiences or things that I've heard from other people. And so like growing up, I guess in the modern Americanized cryptid world, skinwalkers are kind of like amalgamated into like mimics or shapeshifters in general.
Yeah,
When in the reality is that skinwalkers are like the idea of like a witch, a person doing bad witchcraft is like an actual thing. Like there are people out on the res right now who are practicing bad witchcraft and
and
bad
I
bad
think
medicine.
that's relatable to pretty much any tribe, because
Yeah.
Indians, man, there's some spiteful people, man. They're
Yeah.
vengeful. They're sometimes very angry people, and you don't want to get on their bad side. That's for
Yep.
sure. So
I always tell, because I out here people always ask me about Skinwalker stories, right? And I preface it by telling them like what it is, like to our worldview, and then I'm like, let me equate it to something that you might understand. Think of the Death Eaters from Harry Potter. Like that's what skinwalkers on the Navajo Res are. They're a secret group of people who take death oaths and do a bunch of really dark stuff. That's what they do. And so back home, it's both seen as a way to keep the kids in line, like keep the kids behaving.
caution
But
your
it's
Mm.
also, unfortunately, sometimes it's kind of used to explain like some of the weird stuff that happens to people. And in my personal worldview, sometimes I'm like, yeah, maybe that person actually did get witched. And then other times I'm like, no, they got their comeuppance for being a dumbass,
yeah,
you know.
oh, oh yeah.
Yeah, but back like my dad, unfortunately, I have some stories about my dad I can tell you, but sometimes he does that. He like somebody will do something, he's like, oh, it's because they're a skinwalker. I'm like, I don't think
Yeah,
so.
we have that too, where it's just like the scapegoat is always like little people. It's like something goes
Oh yeah.
it's
Yeah,
broke.
yeah.
Man, little
Yep.
people are messing with me again. I'm like, sure, I'm sure you just didn't place it.
He's like, no, you're forgetful, lady. But yeah, so back home, it's kind of that's the kind of the dynamic of growing up with it, right? And there's also, it's not just Skinwalker stories, but it's also other stuff too, that weird stuff. So the whole Skinwalker thing, in my opinion, it's like I mentioned, it's bad people doing bad things. They do a lot of weird stuff. They witch people. They do all this stuff. All these really just bad things. Some of it's unspeakable. Other people will go right into it. Um, but for me, it's just like the experiences I had were kind of the taunting type stuff. The things that were kind of poking and prodding at me or the other people in my life. So the first story I can tell you guys is about my dad. My dad, I didn't really grow up with him. He left, he had some severe PTSD from this desert shield
Mm,
and kind of just drank it away. And so I didn't see him very much. But one time we have a sheep camp. So on the reservation, certain families or people can have like designated sheep camps up in the mountains because like down low it's so dry, there's not a lot of grazing stuff. But
mm,
in the summertime you can send your livestock to go up into the mountains, and so there's more stuff out there to chew on for all the grazing. And so up there's bobcats, there's mountain lions and bears and a bunch of manner of different animals. And so up there, my dad, there's a sheep camp, and it's kind of like in this valley. It's like a valley inside the mountain, and it's there's two sides, and it goes all the way down. And there's different people who have different settlements up there,
mm,
and sometimes you may be with them around the same summertime. You might run across them. Sometimes they're related. And so there was these people that everybody, when the sheep camp would go up there, even my dad heard about it when he was little. There was this old couple, and every time my dad saw this guy, I remember seeing him growing up too. Whenever we go up there, he's an old guy, and he would always point at my dad and point his cane at him. He's just like talking Navajo to him and point at my dad. And I always ask my dad, I'm like, how come he does that to you? And my dad, super casual, he'd just be like, oh, because he's a skinwalker. I'm like, well, how do you know?
Ah.
And then he told me. So what my dad did is after he got back from Desert Shield, and my dad went crazy hoorah in the core. Um, he did some like survival school and all that stuff. And so one night he was like, while he was up there, he kept hearing laughing from their hogan. The hogan is like the little Navajo hut.
mm.
He kept hearing laughing, and he was like, "What are they doing?" And so he got a ghillie suit. He got his ghillie suit, and he got his scope, and he literally like waited for the a night where the moon would be illuminating the sky, and he literally just stalked them. And he just sat there for hours and hours, like figuring out what the hell they're doing. This couple, and they were old. They were like in their 60s ish, and the moon was lit, and he just told me he remembers just laying there, and then he saw them laughing, and then they came out, and they were completely naked, and they were like covered in white paint, like white. It was either paint or ash, and they were literally just running around in the field there, just like goofing off. They were probably drunk or they were high on something, and they were just
Yeah.
acting crazy. And then my dad knew. He was like, "Oh shit, okay, this is legit. They're actually like they're skinwalkers. They're the witches." So he got the fuck out of there. And he went back to the camp, and then like the next day he was like, I'm going home. And he kind of told everyone what he saw, and everyone thought he was bullshitting. And then he went up like a year or two later, I think. He was just hiking. He just wanted to go up and explore that whole area, that mountain range. And this is the Chuska mountain range. So it's like, I call it the tail end of the Rockies. So it's like up here in Utah, we have like these really high mountains. But back home, it's like kind of the tail end. So it's still, there's a mountain range there. And he figured he'd go hike up and down it and check it out. And this is where he had a weird story where he said he found a cave that looked like people lived in there. So he was like confirmed skinwalkers were living here and doing their shady stuff here.
Mhm.
And then he went up to a peak, near a peak, and he tells me he found like a stone like altar of sorts. It looked like an altar, and it had a lot of old Navajo symbols etched into it. And then that's when he like had a bad feeling where he felt like somebody was watching him from behind. And he was like he could hear somebody talking to him, like not talking. He described it like basically like this idea like telepathy, where like you could hear the ideas and the thoughts of someone else but not the exact words. And so the feeling that he got was get out of here. Like, you're not supposed to be here. And he looked, and all he saw was like a dark figure in the trees. And he doesn't know what it is. He's like, maybe it was Bigfoot. I don't know. That's what he says. But he just left.
Let's go back to the tablet. So it was a stone,
Like
like
it
command.
was like an altar of sorts.
Uh,
Yeah, and like maybe not like the way he described it, as far as I understand, it wasn't like a big block square.
hmm.
It was like these sandstones kind of stacked on top of each other, and then
Mm.
on the top one there was a bunch of etchings on top of it. And so he got pretty weirded out by that. And that right when he was kind of looking at it, that's when he felt that feeling from behind him, just kind of really bad feeling of like, just get out of there, get out of here. We don't want you here, type
Yo.
of feeling.
That's wild.
And then he went down the mountain and he got lost, and there was a search party for him.
Wow.
And he thinks he got witched to be confused
Mhm.
to not get off the mountain. But then like my mom and my uncles are like, no, he was just drunk and got stuck. So I don't know what to believe with that. But it's interesting to think about, but yeah, that was a fascinating story from my dad, that happened to him.
That's
And
that
then
some hang on really quick. Let me some Walter White stuff. He's I don't know where I was. I
Oh, yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's pretty much how it would. And again, like, I don't know what to believe with my dad sometimes, but it's fun to think about. I'm like, what did he experience, right?
Kudos
Uh,
to your dad for going back, because after that first night, if I heard laughing outside, I'd be like, "Nope, I'm gone." Like, not even gonna like
well, that's the
investigate
funny.
this or look
Yeah,
into it.
that's the
Like,
funny
I'm
thing is
done.
like my family goes up there no matter what, and they're kind of like, yeah, those are the crazy people. They're the witches. They just like, it's just funny because my aunt, his sister, she was telling me a story about when, because I went up there with them for like a little reunion, like, oof, almost 10 years ago now. We were up there and she was telling me how my cousin at the time, who was like probably 10, she was playing up in the trees while they were doing some logging,
Mm,
and they heard something running down the hill, because I told you it's like in a valley.
yeah,
Something was running down really fast, and she's like, who the hell is that? And she looked and she saw it, and it was like legitimately a black mountain lion.
yeah,
And she's like, why the hell is it black? Because mountain lions are like brownish,
yeah.
but it was black. And she said she saw its eyes and how they were like really yellowy. And it like jumped over her, my cousin, her daughter. It jumped over her, stopped, looked at them, and then just kept running off. And
Dang,
then
that's
she's like, I,
wild.
I got a bad feeling about that. And so we packed up and left the next day.
Dang,
And
I almost got
so
attacked by a black cougar one time. She was in her 40s.
That's
How long
funny.
were you sitting on that? Like, listen to that story. Like, when did that cross your mind to make
Okay,
that joke?
let me hop in. Trying to be respectful, but come on, let me hop
But
in.
yeah, that was interesting. And no, for me, like growing up, so all these for me before, they were just stories, right? They were just stories until I went up there. I want to say 8 years ago now, about 8 years. I went up there by myself because there was a corral there, and my uncle was really bitching and complaining how it needed to be fixed because we're gonna put the sheep up there later in the summer. And then there was a cabin that was like partially destroyed, so we're like, okay, I'll go up there and I'll just like start cutting some stuff. And just plus I was like, I want to be up, by myself for a bit, like being with some nature. So I'm like, fuck it, I'll just go out there. So I go up there, I take my grandfather's truck, and I have this water barrel. It's huge. It's like, the
Mm,
typical water barrel, like this high, maybe this round. And before I left, I filled it up with water just because I was like, I'm gonna be up here for maybe 2 or 3 days, just cutting down wood, fixing things up, just messing around. And I get up to the mountain at dusk because I had to drop off some firewood on the other side of the mountain to some family. And I'm like, oh man, it's getting dark. Maybe I'll set a fire and cook something. And I'm looking through my supplies. I don't have I didn't pack matches or a freaking lighter. Like, rookie mistake. So luckily at the base of the mountain, it's about like a 20-minute drive down to the base. There's a gas station in a place called Red Valley. And so I woke up the next morning and I was like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go get my, matches and or a lighter or something.
Mm.
So I drove down there, and I get to the base of the mountain. I go in there and I just grab it. I was only gone for maybe like 3 minutes or so. I come back out, and the water barrel that was in the back of the truck was tipped over, and I was like, "Oh shit! Like, what happened?" And I went over, and the lid was off of the water barrel, and the water was completely gone. And I was like, "Oh no! Like, it wasn't secure. Maybe it fell down while I was coming down." But I would have heard that,
Mm-hmm.
like tipping over in the back or something, because it was upright the entire time because I had it tied down, and it was like on its side. The ties were off. The lid was off because it was like one of those lids that you seal,
Yeah.
and it was gone. And I was looking around. I'm like, did somebody just fucking steal my wine? I was like, what happened to it? And then I looked inside the barrel, and there was like dried leaves and dirt inside of it, as if like it was empty for months, like completely dry. The inside of the lid was dry. I looked in the pavement. I looked everywhere. I was like, where did this water go? Like, where'd it go? And then I went back inside. I was like, I'm gonna have to buy more water. So I bought like these giant Arrowhead, like 2 gallon thingies. And literally just drove in silence back up the mountain.
Ooh.
And I was like, what is this? This is more of a paranormal story rather than a Skinwalker story, but yeah, that spooked me first. I was like, that was really weird. I was just the whole day I was running everything through my head. I'm
Mm.
like, someone stole my water, but I was like, but it was dry in the inside. I filled it to the brim before I left. I was so confused. I was really
Wow.
stressing out about it. And that day I did all the stuff. I cut down some wood, I fixed the corral. And then that night, um, that's when things got weird. And by this time, that old couple I told you about that like had a cabin up further north, they passed away by this point. They passed away like in the mid 2000s or something like that.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, they're not there. I was literally the only one up there. And I like to sleep in the back of the truck. I like to just look up, under the stars.
Yeah.
I'm a romantic like that, I guess. So I was prepping, and some of the military training I had, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put my rifle inside my sleeping bag, if any in case anything happens.
Mm.
And it was right when I was kind of just like, dozing off. The sheepdogs from one of the other sheep camps started barking, and because it's this weird, narrow valley, it echoes.
Mm.
So I just hear boo, 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 and then some of the cows were mooing. A lot of the cows, you can hear them echoing throughout the valley. And I figured, sheepdogs, cows mooing and whatever. But then they kept getting closer, the sounds of the cows and the dogs barking, and I realized like the cows from down there, whatever was bothering them was coming closer to me. And then that's when I perked up, and I was like, oh no, maybe it's a mountain lion, because I got really nervous about it. Uh, so I literally just like had my rifle inside of my sleeping bag, and I was just kind of laying there. I'm like, "Oh, maybe I should just go inside the truck." And it was right around that moment where my truck was kind of up, because I told you again, it's a valley. The
Mm.
truck was kind of parked up like this, and so I'm sleeping in the back. And up in the higher portion of the mountainside in the valley, I hear crunching, and I'm just like, okay, is that a deer? Is it the mountain lion? Because I kept psyching myself out, thinking that it was a mountain lion or something. But I
Mm.
kept hearing the and like in the pine leaves and the pine cones and stuff. And so I'm just sitting there like anxiously trying to figure out what it is. And then I hear the stomping stop.
You.
And then when I hear it stop, I knew what my dad was talking about that feeling,
Mm.
that hair on your neck, someone's looking. And it's weird because I'm laying down and it's above me somewhere up here. And it's weird. I felt like this, just like the bad vibes, the whatever it was, kind of coming towards me on the top of my head. And I cocked my rifle, and I was like, what is this? And it was just this weird feeling.
Yo.
And I chalked it up at first to survival instinct, that maybe my body was telling me that like there legit was like a predator over there, like a
Mm.
bobcat or a mountain lion. And I didn't know. But I started just like doing like a prayer, and I got out some, some some pollen, and I started just going like this, and I got back, and I was just like, just like I'll sit here, wait it out, and then whatever it was, it just ran off.
Warren and I had experience like that.
I was about to say the same thing.
So we're at one of my friends' bachelor parties. We're camping out in the wilderness, and I brought a tent. So Warren and I were sleeping in the tent, and then some of the guys are sleeping in some one of the cars over here. Another guy's sleeping in hammock over here, something like that. And we're laying in the middle of the night, and we hear just like a, and we're like, "What the heck is that?" And you could hear somebody or something walking on top of homie's car over there when they're sleeping. That's what we're like, yo, giant light. It's a black dog. It's a little country dog that's out there, but it was like walking on top of the cars over there.
Oh
I'm like,
man.
what is that sound?
Yeah.
That deer
yeah.
woman was up there just like dancing on top of the car. Kinda like that goat person creature from Drag Me to Hell. Or you
Yep,
know
yep.
what I'm talking
Oh yeah.
about? That's what I
I
imagined.
thought
I was like, yo.
I thought you were gonna talk about. I think it was the same night where those owls like above our tent, like
Oh man.
sound like they were like fighting. It was like two loud ones just like screeching back and forth.
Yeah, that was weird too because
Yeah,
this was a different time. We're
yeah.
clean up at Cat Springs, which is my family allotment land, and Orrin and I were sleeping in a tent. Again, another guy in a hammock over here, some guys sleeping in the cars over here, and the car was on, and so we heard just a steady, the hum of the engine, and it was raining that night, and I remember we're just laying in. It was actually like really peaceful. There was a lot of nice white noise. It's like one of those white noise videos you play when you're sleeping. Yeah. And we're laying here on the ground, and we hear hoo hoo.
Oh
And
shit.
on the other side, because we're under the trees, we hear hoo hoo. We're like yo, and then I don't know how long it lasted, or you may remember better, but it seemed like 15, 20 minutes. But
Yeah, it felt forever.
back and forth, but they were right above us. And I
Dang.
swear that I heard somebody or something like walking behind our tent. And I hear, who are they? That last part was a joke, but the rest of it really did happen. I was like, yo, this is scary.
Dude, that would be because some owls, man, they sound pretty crazy when they're screeching.
Yeah, like legit. I was like in the sleeping bag, like.
Yep. That was literally me. And yeah.
Yeah, we
But
don't
that was my semi up and close and personal experience with something. Now,
Mm,
again, I could chalk it up to maybe that was a skinwalker, or maybe it was a spirit, or maybe I don't know. I just don't know what it was. I didn't
yeah,
have any visual confirmation, but I do know whatever it was made me feel very, very, very like scared and
yeah,
sick.
I say trust your instincts, trust your gut.
Yep.
It definitely was something. Just
Yep.
the way that you're talking about it, it definitely
Yep.
was something.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's something about those mountains, it's one of those places. There's these two Navajo, they used to be Navajo wildlife rangers, and recently they've been going to UFO conferences just talking about their experiences.
Yeah.
Mm.
I bet
And
people eat that up.
what's that?
I said I bet people eat that up.
Oh, they do. Yeah, they
Yeah.
definitely
Native
do.
Americans talking about skinwalkers.
Yeah, and they were talking about their hypothesis is that like skinwalkers, poltergeist activities, and UFO things are all connected.
Yeah.
And they were talking about some of the weird experiences that made me think more about the water experience I had. They were talking about how every once in a while something is throwing pennies at them, like this weird phenomena where they'll be like in their office or they'll be out in the wilderness, and something just throws like little pennies and coins at them, and they don't know where it's coming from. And then they talked about how one experience where they literally just saw this penny just like literally appear in the air and then just like land on one of their heads.
Yeah.
Oh, Indian leprechaun.
Yeah, for real. That's what it sounded like. I was like,
Leprechaun on the res.
Navajo leprechauns. That'd be funny. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
you can
weird.
get a little Mike and Funny Bone. Yo. Yo.
Two little rapping native leprechauns.
Yeah, just like buy my CD. Where's my pot of gold?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's interesting hearing their experiences and then like mine experiences. I was like, there's something definitely weird there. There's definitely I don't know. It's weird. And then Skinwalker Ranch is only like, I don't know, an hour away from me.
Yeah, I
And
watched that whole show on History Channel, the secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. It's
and
fascinating.
I know the owner. He actually friended me on LinkedIn.
Oh,
Really,
nice.
Yeah.
Brandon, I forget his last name.
Brandon, what's his face?
I
Shoot,
forget.
what am I
But
forgetting
I
his
mean,
name?
yeah, he's a mogul. He's out here doing it, and he bought Skinwalker Ranch. He's funding it with his own money, just to
Brandon
try to.
Fugel, that's his name.
Yeah, Fugel. He's trying to find answers, and I
Yep.
respect that so much. But also, he's not keeping it secret. You know, he's literally having camera crews there all the time, paying an astrophysicist to monitor it like months out of the year and do experiments to see like, you know, what is going on here. What is this phenomena of this hotspot of the paranormal?
Yeah,
And
he
they're
just live
finding
up the road
answers.
from me.
Ah, that's really cool. I'm a huge fan of
Yeah.
that show. I think it's really neat. And before I had watched that show, if you had ever mentioned uh, UFOs and Bigfoot in the same sentence, I was like, get out of here. But after watching it, man, I think there is something to there being not necessarily portals, for lack of a better word, like interdimensional,
Rifts in reality.
yeah, some tears between the fabric of space and time, and there's something about certain places, and I think that there's some places like that in Oklahoma too, similar to Skinwalker Ranch, where it's just like weird things happen, you know, and when people say the secret of Skinwalker Ranch, you know, when they're blowing off rockets into the sky to measure something, that's when a UFO pops overhead, and it just like, you know, it makes this little like path through Skinwalker Ranch, and it's fascinating because it seems like if they're looking into it, that's when they're getting um, some type of response in a way, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. So
There was something fascinating. So you guys know the lore behind it, right? How the land got cursed.
yeah, I know something
Yeah.
about Navajo and the Utes. They, you know, they're pity against each other, something like that. You
Yeah, that's the old stories from the Ute side.
know,
And I heard something very interesting. So do you guys know the podcaster Native Film Talk?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ian, he's Navajo, and he told me that the longitudinal line from Skinwalker Ranch, if you go all the directly south, it goes to a specific area on the Navajo reservation, where there's supposedly a lot of hotbed activity too. Really, really
Interesting.
fascinating stuff. But
Huh.
yeah, that the cursing of the land I thought was always interesting. I've always thought it'd be cool to capture that in a film,
Mm.
like literally show like, because I had this idea that like it'd be cool like if you were to do a Skinwalker film, the cursing of the Skinwalker Ranch basin would be a perfect like cold open to explain like how everything works, to the
Mm.
audience, and just kind of showed it like, yeah, like this is what happened. It was cursed. Weird stuff happened here, and people went insane and stuff like that. And so,
why do you think it was cursed? Can you explain on that?
from what I understand, it was because like for the longest time, the word for enemy in Navajo was the Ute. So
Dang.
the words were pretty synonymous, right? So
No.
especially with the introduction of horses, we beefed a lot, and we would take each other's women and children all the time and everything. And so the myth legend, which I personally think is there's some truth to it, is that there was some Utes who raided some Navajos and took some of their women and children. And of course, in retaliation, some Navajos went up there, took their women and children back, and then cursed the land as a retaliation, to basically,
Mhm.
you did this to us. Good luck trying to navigate this.
Hmm.
So that's the narrative that I've been told. Um, not sure if it's 100%, but a lot of the Utes up there swear by it.
Hmm.
The Tippanogas nearby too, they also hear a lot about that as well. And so uh they literally tell their children like don't look into the direction of the ranch, like don't wander near there, don't talk to people who work there and stuff like that. So it's really like taboo for
So
them up
people,
there.
yeah, people in that area, native folk, really probably think that they're out there doing like really bad stuff, just experimenting, huh?
Yeah, that's some of the native folk I talked to that said that like yeah, like he's poking Brandon Fugel's poking up something that he shouldn't be poking,
So it's kind
right?
of like native Area 51, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's interesting that it's I think originally it was called Skinwalker Ranch because people kept seeing like a giant wolf,
Hmm.
but no, it's like because of the cursing, it's because of that.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's interesting phenomenon to think about. And I talked to some Navajo people, and they're like, "Yeah, probably." It's like they're like, "Yeah, that's probably what happened." And it's just funny. Like
Dang.
and the Navajos are so nonchalant about it, but then other Navajos are like, shh, like don't talk about it, don't talk about it. Um, I don't
So,
know.
so Elias, I have a question. What do you think about the actual shape-shifting nature of the people who practice skinwalking?
So I think there's the two worldviews about this, right? You have the worldview that like skinwalkers on like in real life, they're actual people who just do really bad shit, like in real life. Like if you were to take a secular worldview, people who don't believe in any spiritual matters, they would see skinwalkers as people who are committing a bunch of crimes, like murder and sodomy and necrophilia, right?
Mm.
But then you have the Navajo worldview that's like, yes, they are that, but they also participate in this bad medicine that allows them to transform into different skins of animals. And that's the thing too, is like you type in skinwalker on Google, you'll either get like some weird werewolf, or you'll get the Yibiche dancers, who are the dancers. I actually think you guys have it on your logo.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh
the
yeah.
Yibiche dancers, right? And to a lot of people, they look weird, but to a lot of Navajos, they're just like they're dancers, kind of like the Apache crown dancers and other stuff
Mm.
like that.
Yeah.
But they look weird, and it pisses me off when cryptid shows or History Channel is like the Skinwalkers, and then they show the Yibiche, and it's like what? I don't know. It's kind of weird, but so you have the people who believe that they can actually shapeshift into these creatures
Mhm.
or into any animal, right?
Mm.
And it's like anywhere from a bird all the way to a mouse. Apparently, that's kind of like the
Dang.
idea. And so, my personal opinion, I don't know, but based on some of the weird stuff that I experience, it's definitely possible that they actually do the shape shifting. And
Yo, Oren, there's a skinwalker
oh, what
behind
the
you,
fuck?
boy.
That's my
Keeps
cat
opening the
Loki.
door, closing the
Okay, I was
door.
like, oh, I should stop talking.
Yeah, I'm like, behind you.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh no. Uh, anyways, but
There's one
so
right
there's also
behind me, isn't there?
yeah.
No, he's in front of you.
But
Dang.
there's also this old, I heard this from different places, so there's consistency there. But the idea of shape shifting was actually more of like a neutral power, a neutral thing, where because the idea was that you could transform into an animal, because there's certain ceremonies, because we in Navajo culture we have the four sacred mountains, and those are kind of our like boundaries,
Mhm.
like the Navajo land, like this is where we are supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that like there are sacred stones, there's sacred soil that need to be gathered from these different mountains to be used in certain ceremonies. But then like you need to get there faster, you need to get there quicker. And so the idea was that you turn into an animal so that you can go to these places a lot quicker.
Wow.
Mm.
And then the other thing that I also heard too was that before, in the early days when the Spanish and Mexicans and early Americans came, is that the shape shifting was used as a way of espionage to try and both like gather information about these people coming in,
Yeah.
or to witch them as well, to kind of curse them.
Yeah.
And then
So it started off as
so
something practical and
yeah,
something, typically used for good or to helping the tribe, and of course something more spiteful and
yep. And it's really interesting. Navajo history, like our linear history, is kind of divided before the Navajo Long Walk and after the Navajo Long Walk, like our recent history.
Mhm.
So like before the Long Walk, this idea of the skinwalkers and stuff was a lot more, like I mentioned, kind of holistic and practical. And it wasn't until after where things start to get a little bit more sinister. There's inversions of things. Um, the idea is that like a lot of the ceremonies, like uh, there's so hogans are the Navajo structures, and they're supposed to be built with their doorways facing the east,
Yeah.
which is the sacred direction where the sun rises, right?
Same. That's how Plains tribes set up their teepees.
Yeah, same thing. But if you find a hogan with a door facing the west, you destroy that thing as soon as possible because originally that was meant that was where the witches, that's where they meet, right? And it's funny too because I've heard that a lot of medicine men, they know both like the light side of things and the dark side of things so that they can be able to identify.
Mhm.
And so it's interesting. I hear different things from different people, and it's hard to have a consistent narrative. And I think, ironically, I think that's done on purpose to try to keep the vagueness of it all so that maybe normal people couldn't know too much about it and get hurt. Um, but I'm of the opinion that you need to know so that you can combat it or, stay away from it.
Yeah,
And
protect yourself.
so, yeah. And
To
so
look
it's
out for.
interesting.
Yeah.
What's that?
I said so you also know what to look out for.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
you know what to look out for. So you're not naive to what could be happening to you, or if you're interacting with somebody who claims to might be helping you,
Yeah.
but then you realize like, oh no, they're probably fucking with me and witching me, right? But yeah, like there's different signs you can find out. There's one story I forgot to tell you guys about my great grandfather, and um this is like in the, I want to say, the 80s when my mom was younger. His car kept getting like breaking down. And so one day he figured, I'm just gonna go and figure out what's going on. He realized it was his muffler. And this is the old long cars and Oldsmobiles, Pontiacs, they were giant,
Yeah.
giant freaking Titanic-like cars, right? His muffler was huge. And he remembers just like looking through and he's like, well, what the heck? There's something stuffed inside this muffler. And so he went in there and he pulled it out and it was a skin. It
No.
was a
Ooh.
fox skin. And that really freaked him out. And inside of the skin was like the skull, like the skull of it was still attached to the skin. And
Ooh.
so he like he like threw it down, he burned it, called the medicine man, and was like, I need you to bless me, bless my car. And the medicine man, do you guys know about crystal gazing?
No, I don't think
Mm.
so.
So crystal gazing is what a lot of Navajo medicine men do, where they get a crystal and they literally just stare into it, and the crystal is supposed to reveal to them certain things about the patient's life.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like
Oh.
I call it a therapy stone because like there's jokes about it on Navajo meme pages. There's jokes about it. It's actually really funny. But it's like the medicine man will look into the crystal and then look at you and look into the crystal and then it'll kind of reveal to him like, okay, so this is going on with your life. This is going on. You need to realign yourself this way, right? You need to be realigned. And so the medicine man was like, someone's like trying to witch you. And my great grandfather was like, why? And he goes, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. He didn't know. I can't tell you everything, right?
Yeah.
But
Hey,
I don't know.
just
It's
really quick,
fascinating.
Elias, can you elaborate on the significance of a animal for animal hide for skinwalkers?
Yeah, I again, like I think it just has to be an animal. Now this is the other thing too. I'm reaching into some weird territory that like I don't know too much about. That's the thing. It's only just hearsay from what I've heard. And there's a lot of Navajo ceremonies where um, you need buckskin, clean buckskin. That's kind of the thing. It can't have any puncture holes in it. It can't have any, from arrows or bullets.
Wow.
And so there's actually some people out there who specifically go out of their way to try to harvest a buck without puncturing it. And there's different ways they do that, and I don't know. And I personally think those are like sacred things that I don't know too much about that I have to be initiated to know about. But as far as I heard, the skins of these animals that skinwalkers use have to be harvested pretty much in the same way.
Hmm.
That they have to be no punctures, no none of that. and that the animal has to be something that you yourself harvested too. So it's interesting, and that's the length of what I know, you know.
The idea behind that is they have to have that skin in order to shapeshift
To
into
transform, yes, they have to
Mm.
have that, the
animal.
skin of that animal. So like if you harvest a fox, or even like a cat, if you have that skin, you're able to use that skin to transform into that animal. And then I've heard different things about the soul, the spirit of that animal, how you have to, even as a skinwalker, like you have to let it go so that you can utilize its skin. Or sometimes the spirit of that animal maybe was killed in a bad way and it might come back at you and stuff like that. It's
Mm.
really, again, it's kind of all over the place. There's different inconsistencies. There's no hard doctrine on it exactly. But that guy's YouTube channel, he did talk about one thing that really caught my attention, was that inside the skins are specific symbols and markings
Mm.
that definitely signify something, right?
Mm.
Um, it's just, I don't know. I'm a world guy. I like to look at other cultures and religions, and a lot of this stuff really sounds very similar to a lot of the neo-pagan stuff that people
Mm.
are have done. You know, like the right hand path and the left hand path. You know, it's just like this idea that there's magic systems that you use for specific sacred things and then bad things, right? It's chaos magic versus order magic and weird stuff like that. But like, it's interesting, like looking at it, looking at Western pagan worldviews, and then looking at ours, and I'm like, yeah, I can see kind of that consistency. But like natives, our worldview of that spiritual stuff is a lot more like, I would say neutral, but it's who's utilizing that energy and that medicine. It's what their intentions are, what they do with it. And in my opinion, like the skinwalkers, the more and more they corrupt things, I think the more and more they get drunk on certain powers or abilities or something. Um, and in the reality of the people who do that is interesting. I've heard people have encounters with people who were skinwalkers, and they're always like, their eyes are always bloodshot, they're always just kind of fidgety and shady. And then I hear other stories where it's like, oh, the skinwalker, like that guy, yeah, he's a like a store owner, he's a skinwalker, but he acts completely normal in everyday life, right?
Mm.
It's this idea that literally, like I said, it's like the Death Eaters in Harry Potter. Like they parade around in the wizarding world like everyday people, but deep down they're doing shady stuff. There's a narrative too that like skinwalkers like that on the reservation, where they're your normal everyday people, but they could be a skinwalker for all you know. You know,
Yeah.
they could. The PBS adaptation of Tony Hillerman's Skinwalkers is kind of that, where Michael Grey Eyes again plays this doctor who pretends to be a skinwalker and like murders all these medicine men. But then, ironically, from like the Navajo worldview, he technically is kind of one, because he's being super shady and he's killing people.
Yeah.
So, without all the shape shifting, right? The shape shifting stuff is for some people up to speculation. But yeah, that's kind of my rant about that. It's I think way too much about this shit.
That'd be fun.
I appreciate you clarifying on all this because, you know, there aren't any Navajo around this area, you know, so pretty much all we know about skinwalkers is the internet, you know, Reddit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've listened to a handful of podcasts from Navajo folk that talk about skinwalkers, or some interviews and stuff like that. And you know, it seems like the main attraction of skinwalkers is, like you said, the shape shifting to animals, and you know, the lengthy arms and legs and stuff like that, and them stalking you and whatever else. But there really is so much more to it, where it's just
Mm.
like, you know, it's just a witch, someone that's trying to do you harm, and they can do
Yeah,
so many
there
different
was
ways.
I had this idea for a college dissertation. I wanted to talk about the connections of skinwalkers and the berserkers, Viking berserkers. So have you guys seen the Northman?
Not
No.
yet.
You guys gotta watch the Northman.
I hear it's
there's
good, but yeah,
actually
I just haven't watched it yet.
there's actually a scene where, because the berserkers were like the front men for the Vikings whenever they did their raids, but a lot of accounts have them wearing wolf skins.
Hmm.
And what they would do is, before, anthropologically it's debated what they did, but it's the consensus is that they would drug themselves with mushrooms and like deprive themselves of food and get into this ravenous rage before they went into battle so that they would be efficient in battle.
Mhm.
And the magical worldview for these guys is that they would inhabit the spirit of one of Odin's wolves and like go out and kill these people efficiently and inhabit the archetypical values of Odin and just be crazy in battle, right?
Mhm.
But it's interesting because I also I was talking with a good friend of mine back home, and he thinks that a lot of skinwalkers, people who practice the witchcraft, do something similar. That whether or not if you believe in the skinwalking portion or not, but they may or may not do this too, where they take certain drugs and then they paint themselves in ash, and there's some really dark implications of what that ash is. That it could be like the crushed bones of your loved ones, stuff like that, you know. But they cover themselves in this ash and then they take a drug, some sort of drug, and then they put on the skin and then go crazy, right? And so it's an interesting connection that I noticed. I was like, oh, that sounds very similar to what the Vikings did in, getting ready for battle. But then like the history of werewolves comes from that part of Europe. And it's interesting to think about that maybe the werewolf archetype and idea came from the Vikings and their berserkers, and how a lot of these men, like think of like Ukrainians who've never seen a Viking before. They might have lore about werewolves, right? These crazy hyped up dudes on drugs with wolf pelts come running into their village and like rip their throats out. You know what I mean? So in this worldview, I think for Navajos, it's like there could be an element of that too, where there is secret organized things done where some Navajo people, some skinwalkers are partaking in this pelts and then the some drugs to try to elicit some sort of response so that they are like they believe that they actually are, or if you take the literal route that they actually are turning into this animal and everything. That was one little aspect of it that I was thinking about writing about, but it's too loose to have any academic standing. It's all just bullshit in my head.
Yeah, going back to when you were my own monitor. Going back to when you said skinwalkers, how some describe them as like bloodshot eyes and like sunken or tripping or fidgety. I
Yeah.
mean that kind of ties into like drug use and like prolonged drug use where there's tripping or whatever. But yeah, that's a solid theory. Just going back to pagan stuff is like people would trip on mushrooms to elicit like a certain spiritual connection and
Yeah.
yeah, so that's
Yeah.
that's a good like connection.
That's my secular kind of analysis, my academic analysis. But then,
Yeah.
my deeper Navajo sense is like it could be a mixture of both,
Hmm.
right? It's like there's certain things we don't know. There's certain practices. I mean, shapeshifting happens in so many other cultures here in North America. Like people shapeshift into different things. Other people do that, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's not just a Navajo thing, but the thing that makes the Navajo thing, I guess, a popular or like attracted to pop culture is that fact that it's like, you know, it's a witch that does it,
Yeah.
somebody who does these bad things. um the initiatory practices are speculated. Have you guys heard some of like the initiatory practices of skinwalkers?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit.
Yeah, so like some of the consistent ones that I've always heard was you have to kill a loved one.
Oh,
uh like and what the emphasis that I always heard, all the consistent ones, is that it has to be somebody who you dearly care for. Like that shit gets dark when you
mm,
really think about it. It's like your firstborn child, your wife, your mom, your brother, like somebody who you like deeply care for. And then it's suggested, and I've heard this from like different people, that you after you kill them, you either you eat them or you use their bones for ceremonies. Like, and that's when shit gets dark, right?
yeah.
It's like when I tell people that, when I tell them, campfire stories, I'm like, this is what it is. They're actually way more terrified of that than like the whole shape shifting thing.
Yeah.
Mm,
Because I'm like, that's the real part of it. Like that's the real horror of it, And that's why for me personally, when I watch The Witch, have you guys seen Robert Eggers' The Witch?
yeah.
So when I watched The Witch, I was like, that's a Skinwalker film.
Mm,
It's straight up. That's literally within the Navajo worldview. It's a Skinwalker film. It's just in a different, completely cultural, Puritans in New England, right? But
yeah.
all the things, like all the psychological stuff, all the not seeing the witches until like the very end, and like
Mhm.
just the psychological stuff that the witches do to the protagonist is literally what happens on the reservation,
Well,
and stuff like that. So I don't know. I might have exhausted you guys
No.
ranting the hell out of this,
no, not at all, dude. I love this. This is great.
Yeah.
but yeah,
Especially with yeah, I haven't thought about that with the witch, how it's, same themes of, Skinwalker, but told through a different culture and,
yeah, yeah. It's
that's
literally just it's pretty much the same, man. It's like I was watching that, and then after I watched it, I was like, yeah, that's a Skinwalker. That's the closest I think we would get for now until somebody makes one, and
yeah.
I'm thinking of taking that responsibility, but I don't know because it's like the fact that I'm talking about it and that one guy's YouTube channel, he talks about it. It's like to the elders, it's hella taboo.
Mm,
You shouldn't be spreading this information. You're spreading the bad energy with it. But I'm like, yeah, but my intention is to like enlighten and to educate.
educate, yeah.
I'm not trying to recruit people.
I'm trying to teach
you
people how
know?
to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
because I think
exactly.
a lot of the, I guess, Western lens of Skinwalker is like we discussed. It's long, lengthy, deformed creatures that are imitating humans, or humans that have, there's something, the uncanny valley of it, of where you see a person where like there's something a little bit off about them, but
Yeah,
you can, like, they're shape shifting.
yeah,
But from a pure educational, like, cultural lens of what you've been talking about, um, yeah, there's more depth than just imitation.
yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and they also
Uh,
mimic too. That's the scary part.
Yeah.
yeah. I was
They
honestly like the true reality of what you've told us is like a lot more horrifying. That people
Mm,
actually go out of their way to do those things, especially to hurt people and
Mhm.
hurt their loved ones. That's a lot more horrifying than imagining, a dog outside that might not actually be a dog.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, in my opinion, like a Skinwalker movie would kind of really do its best to try to show that and elicit that type of horror and show that, like, this is a reality for people.
Mm,
That's why I had such a hard time with Antlers,
yeah.
because Antlers tried to be like, you guys can watch my video on it. I rant
I
the hell
watched
out
it.
of
It
that
was a good
one.
one.
Yeah, and it tried to be non-tribal specific, but because of that, the ideas behind the Wendigo suffered.
Hmm.
Because like I had mentioned in my other video that like the Wendigo to like certain Ojibwe people literally means like an owl, but then like to some Cree people it's like an actual legitimate physical creature in the woods.
Hmm.
And then like to the Haudenosaunee it's like a spirit that possesses you, if you've committed some sort of heinous act. But then like the cannibalism angle is not consistent in all these cultures. It's just like the one weird thing that a lot of Western people really draw on, like, oh, cannibalism, Wendigos. Like it's even used, the antler Wendigo is even used as archetypical imagery in the Hannibal TV series.
Yeah.
So but like the Wendigo stuff isn't necessarily have to be uh an act of cannibalism in some tribes. It's literally just a creature that manifests as greed or is actually just a cryptid. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
it's you get these specific tribal viewpoints that can help you inform the story and the creature and what all of this is trying to tell you. And like for the Navajo worldview of the Skinwalker, it's literally just like, I think for one, it's like don't um I don't know. For me, it's the lessons I learned is like don't make yourself a target in the sense that like like just be nice. I don't know. It's like don't piss off the wrong people because they may or may not know somebody, right?
mm.
There's this funny meme going around that you pay a skinwalker to curse somebody for you, right? Like people on the res were like, "Oh, let's go pay a skinwalker to go witch Donald Trump."
Yeah.
Um it's
That's like the
like
South Park tree fitty when he tries to pay the Loch Ness monster. I don't know if
yeah,
you guys, yeah.
Trinity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't don't know, but it's complicated even for some Navajos, man. It's like not consistent. It's different for every person, but there are some of those consistent things about the lore and in the reality of it all, you know. And so I personally haven't met a person who gave me bad vibes. I've met people who gave me bad vibes when I was in Brazil, but back on the reservation, like I haven't met somebody who like I got bad vibes from them that they were potentially a skinwalker, you know. Like
Mm.
my dad again, oh yeah, they're a witch, oh they're a witch, but that was just him. I think it was just him scapegoating people because he thought they were weird or they did him wrong somehow. So
Yeah, I could see that.
yeah,
Well, sweet, awesome.
I
Any
think
last thoughts?
I don't know, man. I could literally go on and on and on and
I
on and on
know.
and on. I have so much stuff in my head that interconnects to crazy shit.
We should do a part 2 or another
Do
podcast because,
another one
like,
at some point.
yeah,
I definitely want to hear more. And I know that you guys probably have more than just skinwalkers over there as well.
Mm.
You know,
we have the furry people. We got thunder beings or like certain types of spirits and stuff. Oh, hand trembling is a whole interesting phenomenon that
about that.
I
Oh,
don't know too
interesting.
much about, but
I only know about that when I drink too much coffee.
yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of other stuff too that's fascinating that like even for me, I'm like, whoa, I never heard of that. I try to talk to other people, Navajo people, what they know. And then I've been listening to your guys' podcast and hearing some of the stuff that some of the guests that have talked about is really eye-opening and really fascinating.
I
It's just
do.
like
Yeah, and
hearing the lore from different tribes is really fascinating.
Absolutely. It really.
that's the most interesting part is just uh hearing similarities, hearing differences, and like what we all grew up hearing, like everything, like specifically my tribe doesn't have anything specific. I've just heard it's campfire stories, like don't you know go beyond the tree line, don't go play in the woods at dark. It's like stuff like that, like deer woman. I've heard those stories. Stickinis aren't even like specific to my tribe. That's a was it Seminole?
Yeah, I believe so.
What is
Yeah,
that?
Stickinis, they're like owl creatures, like same, not same thing as skinwalkers,
They're
but
like bad medicine men, but
yeah.
they're supposedly shapeshift into owls, to giant
Mhm.
owls, and they hunt children and they eat the hearts out of their victims.
Yeah.
Dang.
Apparently, when they transform, it's a very painful process, and they have to vomit up their intestines, including their like heart and stuff like that, and they hide them at the tops of trees or in holes, where owls live. And supposedly, if you can find the organs of a Stigini and you destroy them, then that's how you kill them. So it's very similar, but this is Seminole Creek type creature, and
Mhm.
we've heard stories about that over here in Oklahoma, because there's big Creek Seminole population over here, but it originated out east, Georgia, Florida area.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Very spooky stuff, man.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk more about all that stuff too, because my tribe, we have shapeshifters and stuff too, um, and a whole lot more lore about owls as well. Like that's our big boogeyman.
Yeah,
It's
that's
an
a consistent
owl.
one I'm finding that goes all the way down to Mexico.
Yeah,
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, there's some Mexican tribes who also see owl. Like, there's a lot of Mexican people here in Utah,
yeah,
and I talk to them a lot, and they say too, like they always hear their grandmothers saying, like, if you see an owl, like say a prayer, run away, like look away. It's really interesting. I'm like, dang,
Oh,
all the way
wow.
down in Mexico, man.
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Fascinating. For
Absolutely.
us too. For us, it's the same thing. It's like I grew up hearing that it was like owls or omens of both of something,
Mhm.
not necessarily bad things, but just things. Like
Yeah, I mean, they could
I've
be
always
messengers of bad omens, or they
yep,
could just be the incarnation of evil, or they could just be letting you know that a family member is passed or is about to
yeah,
pass. So,
Yeah.
yep,
make it right. Call your family, tell them careful, stuff like that.
yep. It's kind of like the ravens in Norse mythology.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Very fascinating.
Yeah. Just going back to the worldview, where every culture has something similar like that, like anthropologically. It's interesting stuff, like because I mean, like you said, you look at things through worldview, I try to do the same and just like look for similarities in different cultures and stuff like that. So
Yep.
it's interesting how many similarities there are.
Heck yeah.
Yep. I think
Uh,
one day maybe we'll have an explanation for the supernatural.
Yeah.
yeah. Hopefully not. You know, I like just making believe. You know,
That too. That too.
fun.
It's fun to speculate and figure out, wonder.
Yeah.
Well, heck yeah. Elias, is there anything you want to ask us? Any last thoughts before we wrap it up?
What's your next film? Oh, you mentioned that the birthday cake one.
Yeah, yeah. So
Birthday
that's
bash.
going to come out this probably, hopefully this summer, this fall, depending on festival run.
Mm.
But we'll give you an early screening of it. You can review it. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's exciting. But other than that, man, I don't know. We might just do some more micro shorts. Keep them under like minute, 2 minutes, just to put them out, do something fun.
Yeah.
So we'll
Would
see.
you guys ever do like a native themed like horror short?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're on our
We
way.
we've been discussing that, like projects, various projects, and just figuring out what to do, like what we can do. So
Yeah, exactly. We don't know.
Cool.
See, that'd be fun though. I mean, those are the types of stories you want to tell.
yeah.
Yep.
Heck yeah, brother. All right.
All right.
When we sign off, we usually have like a little saying at the end, Elias. So think of yours when it comes to your turn, okay?
And
Or
I'll lead us. Yep. There we go. All right.
I don't know.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, or your podcast app of choice. You can find us on Instagram at the Skull Crawlers, on Twitter or X as @_Skull and YouTube by searching for the Skull Crawlers Movie Club or going to bit.ly/Skull Crawlers. And you can find Elias on YouTube under Native Media Theory. And it's the same on Instagram, correct?
Yep.
Okay. And Native Media Theory on Instagram. And as always, sleep with one eye open because you never know who's watching.
And thanks for
night.
wearing your brown pants, Elias.
He's behind me, isn't he?
Good night.
Good night.